What's up everyone, Coach Tony from the Strength House, and today I'm going to talk about how to pick your foot position for your deadlift depending on what style of deadlift you do. Now, a couple of things to consider depending on whether you're conventional or sumo. There's always going to be a bit of a trade-off between the position that you can produce the best force in and the position that allows you to get into the best starting position. And some things to consider for each one. So I'll start with conventional. With conventional, typically the narrower the stance, the more force you're going to be able to put into the ground, and theoretically the more weight you're going to be able to lift. A lot of people will use the analogy of use the stance that you would jump from. So if I were to do the highest jump I could possibly do, which personally is not very high, but I would opt for a pretty narrow stance, right? Feet pretty close together, I'm going to be able to do my highest vertical jump. If I get a little bit out wider, kind of more of like a squat stance, like slightly outside my hips, I'm not going to be able to jump as high. So the narrower I get, the more force I can produce. However, for a lot of people with that really narrow stance, you're going to probably run into some stiffness, maybe in your ankles, maybe in your hips, that is not going to let you get into your best starting position. So there's going to have to be a little bit of a trade-off there. Now, the mistake a lot of people make then with the conventional deadlift is they start to get out wide to the point where then they can't get their hands to hang straight down from their shoulders and grip the bar right underneath their shoulders. The wider you get with your hands, the harder it's going to be to engage your lats, and the longer the range of motion of the pull is going to be. So you can see if I kind of get out just outside hip width here, as I hang my arms down, my knees are going to push my hands out awkwardly wide, and then it's going to be harder to engage the upper body. So what I would rather see people do, if they feel like a really narrow stance on conventional is not so comfortable for them to get into that good starting position, rather than stepping out, I'd rather just see them turn their feet out a little bit. A lot of people get caught up in trying to have their feet totally straight ahead for any kind of conventional deadlift or trap bar deadlift. I don't think there's anything wrong with toeing out a little bit. And in fact, for a lot of people, that helps them kind of screw their feet into the ground and engage their glutes and their hips in their starting position. And now they kind of get that feeling of being a little bit wider as far as freedom to get down to the bar without actually moving their heels where they're going to get a lot of that force production into the ground. All right, so that's conventional. With sumo, perhaps more things to consider. Now, the wider you get, again, the harder it is to put force into the ground. But for sumo, we're trading some of that off for that reduced range of motion and that higher hip starting position. So there's going to be a little bit more wiggle room as far as what works for you, but I'm going to talk more about foot position as far as turning out versus straight ahead. And with sumo, I think it's always best to start kind of somewhere in the middle, kind of that 45-degree angle, and split the difference between feet straight ahead and feet turned all the way out to the side. I think it's pretty obvious why this is not an awesome starting position. You're going to have a really hard time pushing into the floor and just getting the bar moving at all. However, I see a lot of people set up on their sumo deadlift and have their feet almost straight ahead, and this is a big problem, and I'll explain why. So first of all, with your stance wide and your feet straight ahead, just when you're relaxed, your knees tend to be very far inside your feet. Now with that knees in position, that's a pretty poor position to put force into the ground. Even if you're able to really torque your knees outside your ankles and create that torque through your hips, the problem then is going to be you're not going to be able to get to the bar without pushing it forward with your shins a little bit. Those knees are going to want to ride over the bar. That's something okay to do during conventional deadlifts. Sumo, not so much. Any of that knee pushing forward is going to give you a really hard time keeping your hips right on top of the bar and initiating the lift without your hips popping back. So you're going to have to out toe to the point where you can keep your shins right up against the bar, keep your knees lined up with the middle of your feet, and get to the bar with a vertical shin. So a good way to do that, if you're somebody who tends to want to deadlift this way, is to just out toe bit by bit, try to get to the bar, see if you can get to the bar without pushing it forward with your shins. And once you find that position of your feet that allows you to keep the knees lined up with the feet and get to the bar without feeling like you're pushing it forward with your shins, that's probably your optimal foot position and stance width for the sumo deadlift. So there's a little bit more tinkering there. All right, so a couple of options to help you find that optimal foot position, whether you're a conventional deadlifter or sumo deadlifter to find that happy medium between putting force into the ground and getting to the bar in a good starting position.